And now we're at the point where we've historically tried to really kind of go through some steps in regards to interview preparation, and this is twofold. Today it'll just be me, and I'm kind of going through more soft skills, behavior interviews, just general approaches to the different types of interviews, as well answering some of those not necessarily generic, but generic questions, right, that you're sure to get, to make sure you're positioning yourself as well as possible, and preparing yourself as well as possible. And then tomorrow, I've got, assuming things don't back up or get screwy, Josh Crone is the VP of Engineering here at Arrive. He'll be coming and talking through technical interviews, right? And best ways to prepare there, and kind of what hiring managers typically should be looking for or are looking for, and trying to give you a leg up as you walk into those discussions. I love Josh. He's awesome. He's a really, really good dude. And a great leader within our organization. If it weren't for him, I don't think we'd be able to hire near as many great people as we have. So hopefully that'll be a worthwhile discussion there too. Does that all jive? Make sense? Questions? Okay, so I remember in sessions past, I've had issues with the audio. So I kind of had to turn up my video, or excuse me, turn up my audio to make sure that you can hear, which could very well be the same thing again. I'm going to hit the share sound button. Hopefully that'll work. But if it doesn't, let me know. But hopefully this will work here. Can anybody see my? So hold on. There we go. Sorry. Fuck me. Excuse me. All right. Hopefully that works. Let me see if I can share my screen now. Looks like I can. Everything's good there. I'm going to go to the appropriate window, maybe. Oh, son of a gun. It did close my Google. Hold on just a second, please. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Always an issue, never easy, I guess, right? It's not logged in there.
James, I don't think we gave you much of an intro, so if you want to give a quick intro to our crowd.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I thought that I'd done that before, but I have no problem doing it again. So James Lewis, I run kind of the entirety of the people team or people effort here at Arrive, which was formerly just ParkWiz, but that's anything people related, from culture to general operations to, of course, hiring. And hiring is kind of my sweet spot. I've been in hiring for, well, a real long time, longer than I probably should admit. But yeah, that's kind of me real quick. I'm not necessarily a glorified recruiter, but a glorified recruiter, right? But yeah, I've been running hiring, specifically tech hiring, since 2006. I've hired hundreds of engineers kind of across different industries, from digital marketing, e-commerce, content management to individual product organizations as well. And I love what I do. I've met a lot of awesome people and been lucky to work with a lot of awesome people too. I've been with Platoon doing these types of sessions since the Bravo platoon, so it's been a little while. It's been awesome. I hope that I continue to get asked to do this. they're worthwhile for everybody as well. So hopefully that helps. Thank you for the reminder, Ankur. Does everybody see this? Is this everybody looking at my screen and it's working?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So there are a couple of videos throughout this, and I'm going to kind of just maximize this, so hopefully it'll help. But you know, this has changed just within the last year, right? The different types of interview scenarios, and we're kind of seeing it circle back as people get their jabs and normal some normalcies returning to social issues. But there are different types of interview scenarios that you should be prepared for. The biggest one and the first one is typically over the phone, right? You'll take a phone interview. You probably run through some technical questions, be it gotcha questions, maybe, or just general understanding of core principles. As far as prep is concerned, you know, make sure you're clear on what to expect. So if you're talking to a recruiter or a hiring manager prior, just make sure you kind of know exactly what it is that you're going to be doing or asked of. And then as you're kind of talking through, make sure you're as clear as possible in regards to what the hell it is that you're talking about. Make sure you have a good quiet connection. And this guy kind of goes across the board for everything that we see here. Phone interviews, video interviews, make sure you're in a situation in a backdrop, if it's video, that's appropriate and as well quiet. You don't want there to be distracting noises in the background, not just for yourself, but also for the interviewer that you're speaking with. You want to make it as simple as possible. Dress the part, you know, that's as cheesy as, even though you can do it, maybe you don't take the interview in your robe. Right, it could work because it's over the phone, but at the same point, play the part, right? Dress like you're actually meeting and talking to somebody for the very first time, and trying to put your best foot forward, and then try to smile. It's the same thing. You can actually feel, like, I talked to somebody just earlier today who was in Philadelphia, and I could tell he was just having a crap day. Like, I could tell, and or that was just his demeanor, and it kind of was I think if he had tried to smile or enjoyed the conversation, it would have been more pleasant for everybody involved. But same thing, just try to feel good, even though it's an interview and you're obviously going to have some stress. Try to play that part. Now, the video pre-recorded interview, you're probably not going to come across too often, but if you do practice, you know, talking to a screen like I'm doing right now, I can't see any of you. You can't see, well, you probably can't see me to some extent, but you know, being used to talking to a screen when you're not getting immediate feedback from the person that you're engaging with on the other side in regards to facial expressions, it takes a little getting used to, right? So practice that. Do your research on who you're talking to. Do some research on the company, and be prepared. Same thing. Try to smile. It's always good to you know, come across a little bit, not necessarily lighthearted, but pleasant and easy to work with versus you know, nails to a chalkboard. Now, most often these days, you're going to come across live interviews that are going to be either in person or over video, mostly probably over video, but again, that will be changing. Smile, look into the camera, have it aligned with your face. Make sure your backdrop's appropriate. You know, like for this call, this is probably okay. Probably could be for an interview as well, but make sure that the light is appropriate. You know, I used to have this room turned around the other way. The reason why I turned it this way is because it was backlit. Like, anytime there was too much light in this room, you couldn't actually see my face, right? I had to either get too close or too far to focus in on me. So make sure the light is appropriate and that it allows your image to come through and focus. Always sit up straight. I'm not doing that so much. It's a little bit more casual, but sit up straight. Look directly in the camera, try not to fidget as much as you can, and again, dress the part. Timing, allow for delays. This is so true. You know, as I'm interviewing people these days, and we are doing more and more video interviews, I always ask the person being interviewed to log in a few minutes early. Make sure that the audio is correct, right? Like, I unplug my Like, is your headset working, right? Is this platform, does it require different settings than a different platform that you might be using? Just make sure those things are dealt with prior to the interview, to make it as fruitful a conversation where you're focusing on the right thing versus the wrong thing as you start. Bandwidth isn't as much of an issue these days, as things have kind of stepped up, but at the same point, it is an issue. So expect for some delays, and be prepared for that, right? Be prepared for it, and as well, kind of how to handle it, right? If it's hey, I'm struggling a little bit here, I need to interject. Can you hold on just a second? Should we try to dial back in, whatever it is? But try to manage those types of scenarios. And again, make sure you're in a quiet environment, right? That makes sense. So there's also the in-person one-on-one, same thing, be on time. And this, I think we all are probably keen to be early versus late. That is the goal. Like, if you're early on time, if you're on time, you're late. There's a difference there, though, right? If you're in an in-person interview specifically, you don't want to show up too early, right? A half an hour to 15 minutes early, that's probably too early, because it might put somebody in an uncomfortable situation, right? They feel like they have to mind you. You have to sit there by yourself for 15 minutes prior to the interview. My push has always been, get there early, but hang out around the corner or grab a coffee. So to make sure you're in the area, in the right area, and you're going to be there on time, but don't get there too early. 5 minutes, it's plenty early enough. Panel interviews, understand the format. In this instance, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to have 2 or 3 people interviewing me or talking to me at the same time, what are they looking to get, right? Like, who is this person, or who is this group? What format? What component of my skills are they looking to kind of assess? Get an understanding of that in advance. So as you kind of stalk the people online beforehand, you know who they are, right? You know what they're going to be trying to get after, and realize they all went through this too. Interviews are inherently a little nerve-wracking, right? Because you're trying to get a job. They actually, believe it or not, they're nerve-wracking on the other side too. Like, most interviewers are interested in finding the right person. They want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, right? That they are in fact asking the right questions and assessing the right things. If the process is buttoned up, they should be. But at the same point in time, you're not alone in this conversation. It's new, right? These are new people, and you can't help but be a little nervous in those types of interactions. So it's fine. Just realize that you're not alone. Now, the benefit, right, to in-person interviews, either panel or singles, right, is that you get to see the people, right, directly. You get to see how they're reacting. You get to see how they might be playing off of each other. You want to try to incorporate those type of interactions in any sort of answer that you offer. By the way, feel free to, because I don't have anybody on screen right now, I'm just kind of looking at the presentation. Feel free to interject. Just don't raise your hand. Just shout. It's fine by me. Now, mentally preparing for the interview process, and this does depend, of course, on the opportunity and the skill level and the organizations, but the average investment that most people make, that successful candidates make as they're interviewing for roles, is 4 hours per interview, right? Now, that's not per interview, that's per company. That's per company, right? Like, if you're interviewing in my company, you're going to spend about 4 hours, right? Really trying to understand the company. Make that investment. It's good. Like, 4 hours might be a little much at certain stages and for certain opportunities, but you definitely want to try to understand as much as you can about the company, about the role, about the people, about the culture, about the questions you're going to ask. All those things show preparation, right? And they're going to be recognized by the people that you're talking to. Personal brand. You got to be comfortable talking about yourself. Like, that's what an interview is, right? It is, in fact, just like the resume, when we were going through that earlier in the cohort, right? The resume is, in fact, and I'm sure you're still doing that, it is a marketing document, right? Like, you are marketing yourself. The interview is taking that to the next level, right? It's taking what you put on paper as you're trying to market yourself, and now you're doing it in person, right? So you have to be able to talk about yourself. You got to be comfortable, right? It's hard. Same, I still don't really enjoy talking about myself that much, but it's something that you have to do, right? So do your best to get comfortable and identify the things that you most want to speak to, right? As you think about yourself and what you bring to the table. I'm not going to go through this HBR video on personal brand, but it is a very, very good video. I'm going to drop a link to this presentation in the November channel, so you'll have it to take a look at. There are a couple of other videos that I want to make sure that we get to, and I don't want to run too long.
Hey,
But
Jim,
it's a word.
I have a quick question about kind of just talking about yourself, like in an intro.
Yep.
How much would you recommend or recommend against kind of making that sort of casual, but also professional? As in, like, should you talk about like, yeah, I grew up in Michigan, I'm a huge, Pistons fan or whatever? Like, should you have like a personal side to it, or should you just keep it like, yeah, I got into software development, this is why I'm here, and etc. Would you recommend having some like personal flair in that sense, or is that inappropriate?
That's a great question. And I think that's one of those, hey, you do what you're most comfortable with. And as well, if you can read the room a little bit, like some people are not going to be receptive to that, right? Like if you're interviewing at, and that's kind of like, do your best to know your audience and invest some time there. But at the same point, I do think some personal anecdotes are good, but those should be more limited, right? So like, hey, I'm originally from Connecticut, moved to the Midwest, as a kid, definitely took that mentality all the way through education, came to Chicago, pursued a business degree, right at the start of the dot-com boom. And I found my way into recruiting in the early 2000s. And honestly, I've had a great opportunity to blah, 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 right? Like, so there's a little bit of personal anecdote there. There's always an opportunity. You could plant the seed, right? Like, hey, you grew up on the East Coast, you moved to the Midwest, like what sport franchises do you follow, right? Like, or I've been in Chicago for 25 years, whatever it is. Like, there's an opportunity for, if somebody's interested, you've planted some seeds to where they can ask those questions. I think small personal anecdotes, good, right? Super specific might not be relevant as you're giving that 30-second, 45-second elevator pitch on who the hell you are.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
So the different types of interview techniques, what are your strengths? This is a classic, right? So, oops, shit. I don't remember if that one goes first or not. I think it did. I'm going to go ahead and do this one. It is good. It is worthwhile. She's a little cheesy, so bear with me.
So you have a job interview.
This whole thing.
So you have a job interview coming up and you want to do your very best so that you can get the ultimate job offer. Today, you're going to learn how to answer one of the most popular interview questions. You build a business or launch a career you love. So if you're new here, consider hitting that bell notification down below and subscribing so that you don't miss a thing. Real quick, comment down below with what your biggest question is when it comes to doing well in a job interview. Now, before you can answer any job interview question about your strengths, there's a few things to keep in mind. First, be prepared. This question might sound fairly easy, but it's a little bit more complex than you think. The interviewer is asking this question because they want to see if your strengths and accomplishments align with the position. So you want to prepare as much as you can ahead of time. Revise the answers I'm about to give to you to fit the position you are applying for. The responses you'll learn today are a great starting point. However, you'll want to tailor them slightly to fit your needs. So let's jump into it. Step number 1 is to do your research. Before you can properly answer any interview question, you need to find out everything you can about the position you are applying for and the company you are applying with. Research the company's website, review their LinkedIn page, evaluate their activity on social media, read the most recent articles the company has published, read articles that have been published about the company. Doing this will help you find out what problems the company is facing and will help you better tailor your interview responses. Step number 2, make a list. You want to review the job posting very carefully and make a list of the qualifications, the experience, and the skills needed for the position. For example, you might find that the company is looking for someone with analytical skills, such as data analysis or critical thinking. Or you might find that the company is looking for a leader and they want skills in relationship building or someone that can provide constructive feedback. Either way, you need to make a list of the most important qualifications listed in the job posting. And with this list completed, you're now ready to move on to step number 3, pinpoint your strengths. This is where you'll evaluate your career accomplishments as they relate to the position. Next to each item on the list you made in step 2, jot down a sentence or two about how you match up with the skills, the experience, or the qualification listed. Your sentence or sentences should detail specific ways that you've excelled at these items through work, education, or volunteer experience. Make sure the sentences that you jot down show some type of quantifiable result. Step number 4 is to narrow it down. You won't have time to discuss all of your strengths. Pick just 2 or 3 that you can talk about and put in a career story format. The better you can show how your strengths relate to the position, the higher chances of you receiving a job offer. And if you're interested, I made a video all about questions that you can ask an interviewer during your interview. I'll go ahead and link it up in the YouTube card right here, and then I'll also place it in the description below. So let's review some sample answers that you can give in your next interview to address the question 1.
I'm actually going to stop there because I think most of the you can definitely pick this up and finish it up. But the reality is prepare, have a story, and talk to results. And we're going to go through this a little bit more as we go through some additional interview preparation and kind of some question and answer techniques, if you will. But it goes back to resumes, right? And talking through experience. What people want to see and what they want to understand is data. They want to understand results, right? So it's less about qualitative and more about quantitative. And if there's a way, right, to not just draw parallels in your experience versus what they're looking for, but back that up with data and results, that's only going to benefit you. But what are your strengths? It is hopefully not a question that you will receive directly, but you will probably receive this question in a number of different ways. So it's not, what are you good at, right? Like that's a question I ask, right? Like I usually do. And it's really interesting. Like, what are you really good at? Like, what are you really good at professionally? What can I expect, right? That's something that I ask. I don't care about your strengths, right? I do. That's not totally true. But what I really want to know is like where your passions are. Like, what do you think you're most passionate about, and how are those passions aligned with what we're looking for in this position? So that's another frame to look at this. What are your strengths? Conversation. Does that jive? Cool. I love it. Now, this one I actually do like quite a bit, the greatest weaknesses question. I don't like the question, and hopefully it's framed in a different way, like, what are your greatest weaknesses? I mean, that's just not a very good question. We all have weaknesses, but what most interviews really should be looking at is not what you're not good at, but what you're doing or what you have done to address your weaknesses in the past. So anytime that you're talking about either a skills gap or an area where you might not be exactly where you want to be, it's less about the weakness in my mind. What I want to know is what you've done to overcome it, right? But this is actually a technical hiring manager kind of talking through this question and his perspective, and it's worthwhile.
Hi, this is episode 17 of Prondos. I'm your host, Jordan Hudgens. I'm a Ruby dev and the CTO of the DevCamp platform. On Tuesdays, I cover various stages of preparing for a coding interview. And today, I'm going to talk about the best way to answer the question of what's your greatest weakness? To be 100% honest, I'm not a huge fan of this question, because to me, it's a lose-lose type of scenario where if the applicant says a true weakness and is completely honest, they probably won't get the job. But if they lie and they just make something up that's not true, it's going to be evident very quickly. However, throughout the years, I have been asked this question before in interviews, so I thought it'd be a good one to prepare for. Since I've been on both sides of the interview chair, both being the applicant and also being someone who is hiring for a team, I wanted to put together a comprehensive list of the worst ways to answer it, why, and then the best ways to answer this question and what that will tell the interviewer. Here are some bad answers to your greatest weakness. A bad answer is saying that you have a hard time saying no. This will say that you are weak and will take on too many projects, typically resulting in poor performance. The next way to answer this question poorly is to say that you have a hard time staying on a single task. This means you should probably either learn how to focus or that you should be an entrepreneur. Working for a company usually means long hours on repetitive tasks, and if someone is bouncing from project to project, they're not going to be a good asset to the team. Another poor approach to answering this question is saying that you can be arrogant. I had a professor in grad school, Dr. Richard Gelfond, who's one of the most brilliant computer scientists I've ever known, who said this about arrogance. Being arrogant occasionally doesn't matter, but it's never good. An arrogant employee won't be able to work well with others and will have a hard time taking correction or learning anything new because they already know it all. Now let's go over some good strategies for answering the greatest weakness question. One answer would be to say that you can be slow to take action. This is an interesting answer because it could be a bad approach if you leave it at this, since it might tell the interviewer that you are timid, which would be a poor character trait. However, if you follow it up by saying that you are very detailed and that before you start a task, you want to have a clear strategy for how to move forward, that is an employee I want to have on my team. Another good approach would be to say that you can be overly critical on yourself. This will tell the interviewer that you care about your work and that doing it well is very important to you. Make sure to follow it up with how you're working on yourself and that you are still working on being a craftsman at your work, but to not get too down on yourself for irrelevant reasons. Another good answer could be to say that you have a tendency to be quiet. This is one of my favorite things to hear, assuming that the individual follows it up by saying that they can be quiet because he or she thinks that it's more important to listen to all of the details of a project or challenge before giving an answer. This tells me that the individual is going to be detail-oriented and won't miss key items because they were too busy thinking about what they were going to say next. I hope these strategies help you properly answer the what's your great.
So I really like that because I think there is a lot of value in some of those thoughts and perspectives that he put out there. The other thing that I would put out there, and it kind of goes back to maybe either your greatest strengths or your greatest weaknesses, either or if those questions, you can frame it up as needed, is asking questions. Like asking questions is nearly always good, right? And Josh will get into that tomorrow as well. But having a clear understanding of what is being asked of you is kind of necessary, or should be necessary as you tackle any sort of engineering problem. So asking questions is a very good thing. Sometimes it can be too much, right? You ask too many questions, and fail to take action. But asking questions is a really good thing, and I think should be called out. So there's generic interview questions. So this is kind of following up on earlier, right? What adjectives you would use to describe yourself. These are just words, right? Words and attributes and skills that are definitely a positive thing. And I am near certain that each of you can use these words, right? As you look to describe yourself. The one thing that you want to prepare for, right, is if you're going to say, hey, this is me, back it up, right? Like if you're going to say that you are reliable, give me an instance, right? Walk me through an experience where you felt you truly exhibited that character trait, right? I'll be able to back these up. But these are great adjectives, great values, great attributes to look at of yourself. And of course, there are many others, but these are great ways to be able to describe yourself. They're going to easily align to any organization. The why do you want to work here question. I ask this question always, but I ask it in two different ways. I ask, what about our opportunity made you want to apply? And I understand you're currently interviewing in a slightly different format, but like what made you want to apply for this role, right? Like why, right? And what exactly is it that's motivating you into a new opportunity? Obviously, you're all on the hunt for something new. I get that, right? But as you contemplate different opportunities, what's going to make you choose one over the other? Like, say for instance, you got 5 identical offers. How are you going to choose one over the other? Like, what are the things that value, right, that are value to you? So, show you've done your research as you answer those questions, right? Understand the company, understand their mission, understand their past successes, their partnerships, right? Be specific, right? But definitely focus on them. Like, show that you have an understanding of them. Don't say, this is a great company, and I really want, like, you can bring it back to you and say, I really want to be part of this company, this mission. I've seen testimony around, junior engineers being able to take on more meaningful work and grow. That's the type of environment and culture that I want to be a part of. Like, that's cool, right? You're still focusing on the employer there, but you're relating it to how you want to grow. Like, I don't want an environment where I'm just told what to do, right? What I want is an environment like yours, right? Where I can see engineers are growing, right? That the investment is made. Like, that's the company that I want, right? The company that cares about individuals today, as well as where they're going to be in 12, 16, 24 months. Does that make sense? I'm just kind of going through these at a decent clip right now. All right, answer hard interview questions. So behavioral interviews, obviously part of the process as well. They're obviously situational, but truly trying to understand your personal attributes, your individual attributes, and how they align to an organization. So I'm going to get into this one a little bit too.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Ariella from Work It Daily, and today I'm going to share with you the #1 secret to answering hard interview questions. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below.
Sorry. Hopefully we don't do it again. Damn it.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Ariella from Work It Daily, and today I'm going to share with you the subscribe, like, and comment below. Okay, let's get started. For a lot of people, interviews are extremely nerve-wracking. I mean, what if you say the wrong thing? It can totally cost you the opportunity. It's important to bring up relevant, clear examples that prove that you are a fit for that job. But if you have a hard time remembering relevant examples during an interview, I've got an interview hack for you. Create a running document of examples that you can bring up during an interview. This is helpful because it can help you prepare for that interview. So you can review those accomplishments before you go into the interview, rather than have to sit there and figure out what examples you're going to use when the interviewer asks the question. So what kinds of things should you be putting on this doc? Here are a few. Quantifiable accomplishments. Quantifiable accomplishments tie your accomplishments with numbers or results, and these results prove that you offer value. Remember, numbers equal results and results equal value. Keep track of your quantifiable accomplishments so you can use them both in your resume and your interview. Challenges you've overcome. Think about the challenges that you've had to overcome in order to get that promotion, work with that difficult coworker, or get that client. Knowing this is extremely important can actually help you with your examples during an interview. Employers want to know these kind of stories, so think about them, write them down, and put them in your document. Stories that showcase your enthusiasm for work or that reinforce your character traits. What makes you so enthusiastic about your work? Tell a story, be specific. Document those real examples as they happen. These kinds of real stories will set you apart from those generic interview answers that other candidates have. These stories are unique to you and your experiences. For example, you don't want to just tell them that you love helping people. You want to show them by sharing a story. This story should showcase why you love helping people, and it gives the employer an example to work off of. Showing enthusiasm through these stories is an essential part of the interview process. It allows you to showcase your passion for the industry, and it allows you to demonstrate your value. So whenever you have a great accomplishment, a great story, or a great example you feel like you'd want to share with an employer, jot it down, put it in your running document. It'll help you later. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. I'll see you in the next video.
And that's so true. And I try to drive that home as we were talking about resumes at the beginning of the cohort, right? Like just writing down your accomplishments is going to help you prepare, not just for your resume, but being able to talk through your experiences. Like there are difficult times that I've had through the course of my career, and accomplishments that I've thought, yeah, that was awesome. Like, hell yeah, dude, I want to be able to talk about that. But specifics sometimes can be difficult to remember, right? But being able to jot that down and look back on it is only going to prepare you for these types of situations. The Smart Stories format. So this is something that we talked about before as well, right? Smart, STAR, very, very similar, but basically it is an opportunity to think about each individual experience in a very specific way, right? It's the framework. So for SMART, it's like the situational specifics and the meaning, right? That's the SM. It's like, what exactly was happening? Like what is the detail? What happened, right? What was the meaning, right? What exactly was the context behind what was happening? These are a framework to answer, right? And then you've got the action, like what, okay, so I figured out what the hell was happening here. What action was taken, right? Like what did we actually do? Who did we bring in? How do we solve the problem, right? And then exactly what were the results, right? The tie-in is a little bit different, right, from the STAR method, but what is the tie-in? Like if you go back to your strengths, your attributes, how does the way you tackled that situation tie into you, right? To your personal brand. Very, very, very interesting way to look at it. And I think a worthwhile one as well. Preparing for your interview, right? This is always a good one. Some of this is repetitive based upon quick videos that we've already seen, but you want to obviously research the company, right? You want to understand who the hell they are, what they do, how big they are, what kind of growth they've had, what kind of growth they haven't had. Like, it's interesting. As I'm getting back to hiring, I did not hire for outside of fighting attrition over the last 15 months. And I'm finally getting back to scale. And as I'm really starting to interview more and more people, it turns out, like a lot of people went through reductions. Like we actually lost people last year. We kind of had to, right, to stay alive. But like to understand organizational challenges and what they had, and just recognize it. Like as I'm talking to candidates, they're like, yeah, I know a lot of people that have been affected, right? So it's nice to recognize and understand challenges, not just the big wins. Depending upon the organization, understanding their clients and the types of projects and the things that they do. You really want to go deep, you could definitely dig into earnings calls and quarterly reports. I do think Glassdoor is worthwhile. I do think Glassdoor is a site of extremes to understand a little bit about the company. Some of it's very valuable in understanding benefits and things like that. The employee reviews, or sometimes the anonymous reviews that are sometimes you'll see the extremes there as well, right? I don't think unless 50% of the reviews are bad, you should look at the bad reviews, but they're probably not telling the whole story, right? Like the overall sentiment of the organization is pretty good. The bad reviews are probably just somebody that had a bad experience, right? Or wasn't a great employee. But nonetheless, definitely worth taking a look at. But know basically anything and everything that you can. Be prepared to ask some questions around the company. Prepare your background information. So this is very, very, very much not duplicative, but aligned to what we've already discussed. Understand the job, know why, right? You are going to be a great fit, and be prepared to talk about it, right? Why your background makes sense, why it aligns to the company. It's not always going to happen. You can tell that story, you could frame it up appropriately, but what makes you unique and why, again, you make sense for this company. you Amanda always put this in there. You may want to consider using Social Sweepster to clean up your social media accounts. You can if you'd like. I can guarantee you recruiters and hiring managers definitely look up each and every candidate they're going to actually interview to figure out if there's something on the surface that's easily accessible. You can just make your stuff private, certainly on Facebook or Twitter. Well, not so much on Twitter. Well, sometimes on Twitter, depends upon your settings. But if it makes sense to kind of just say, hey, maybe I should clean this up or lock it down, maybe you should do that. But just something to be cognizant of. If you do have public social accounts, make sure it's not something that could be off-putting to a potential employer. All right, so this is another really good video, and I'm gonna kind of turn it over to JT.
Hey there, it's JT, and welcome back to Work It Daily. In today's video, I'm going to give you 8 smart questions to ask hiring managers in job interviews. But before I do that, I just want to remind you to click the link below to subscribe and hit the bell to get instant notifications every time we create new career content to help you get ahead. All right, so what do you do when you're in an interview and we get to that end where the hiring manager looks at you and says, "Do you have any questions for me?" Well, of course you do. In fact, it is very important that you ask questions. I want to tell you that recently an employer I know reached out to me frustrated and said, "I hate when I ask that question and the person says, 'No, everybody's been really nice. I think I'm okay.'" That person, he told me, does not get hired. And the reason for that is that they have real concerns if you aren't asking questions, if you aren't doing your due diligence, and if you aren't having enough value in yourself to ask some clarifying questions to make sure that this place is the right place for you. Remember, we always tell you here at Work It Daily that you are a business of one, selling your services to an employer, and you want to make sure that it's a good partnership. So to do that, you've got to ask questions to make sure that this is the right place for you. It's like kicking the tires or looking under the hood to make sure that you're making a good investment. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the 8 questions you should be asking in your next interview. So before I break down the 8 questions, I'm going to tell you that they fall into 4 categories, and we call them the 4 C's. Now, by covering off on these 4 C's, you're going to make sure that you're asking all the questions necessary to make a good decision about this employer. And those 4 C's are connect, culture, challenges, and close. What do I mean by that? Well, connect simply is you connecting to that hiring manager, to that person that you'll be working with. You want to ask some questions to help you bond in the interview. As far as culture goes, you want to make sure this is the right corporate culture for you. Does this company believe and have values and go about business in a way that you respect and that you trust so that you can put your best foot forward? With respect to challenges, you want to know what's keeping them up at night so that you can make sure these are the kinds of challenges that you actually want to work on and leverage your skills to be successful at. And then lastly, close. You want to end this interview, this conversation on a high note. You want to leave very clear in what the next steps are. So once we know the 4 C's, it gets really easy to create questions that we can ask in the interview to make sure that we're getting the information we need. And that's what I'm going to show you next. So we're starting with connect. And the first question you should always ask in an interview is, how did you come to work here? This is an opportunity for you to bond with this individual by learning how they got hired by the company, what drew them into the company, what made them decide this was a great place for them to work. This is going to give you a lot of insight into their own decisions and what they're like as a worker. The second question is, what do you love most about working here? It's really important that you ask a positive question that lets them talk about all the things that they love about the employer. This is going to be a great chance for you to bond and share a love for the things that are great about working at this company. Plus, you're going to be able to evaluate whether or not these sound like things that you really care about. Remember, these questions are designed for you to get insight into whether or not this company is a good fit for you. So while they're very positive questions, it's also giving you a chance to evaluate whether or not it's a fit. The second C is culture, specifically corporate culture. And the 2 questions you're going to ask here are around individuals that have been hired at the company. The first question is, tell me about the most successful hire you've made recently. Why has that person been very successful in their role? This is going to help you understand who is being recognized in the organization as a high performer. And you want to listen carefully. Let me give you an example. If they tell you about a person who came in and worked 80 hours a week and took everything that they had to do and worked with no budget and really was able to knock it out of the park, Does that sound like a place you want to work? Does that sound like a place with work-life balance that has their ducks in a row? No. So if they're recognizing that as a good hire, then you know this probably isn't the right place for you. Now, the second question you want to ask is the polar opposite. Tell me about a hire recently that didn't work out. Why did they fail in their role? And once again, you want to listen closely to the answer, because we want to see if the traits or characteristics of that person who failed sound like yourself. If you don't think you can be successful there, if this person sounds like they really couldn't have ever won in their job, then you're going to know that this isn't the right place for you. Now, the third C is challenges, and specifically the challenges the company is going to be facing in the coming year. So that first question you want to ask is, tell me about the biggest challenge you think the company will experience this year, and how will this job help to overcome it? What you're doing there is showing them that you understand you're a business of one, you're a service provider, and that what you're going to do is help them solve a problem and alleviate a pain. So by asking them what that pain or that problem is and how you can help solve that, you're really sending a message to them that you understand your role if you get hired. The second question you want to ask regarding the challenges is around performance. How will I measure my own performance to ensure that I'm having a positive impact on this challenge? Once again, you're taking full ownership of your work, of your effort. And by telling them that I understand that I'm supposed to do that, you're sending a clear message to them that you really will be accountable for your actions. And that's a great selling point there. At the same time, though, if they come back to you and say, well, there's no real way to measure and we won't have any idea of whether or not you're making an impact, that would be a huge red flag to you, because you're going to want to be able to do that in order to get a promotion or get a raise. What kind of company can't measure your impact? That's a sign of a company that you probably don't want to work for. So you can see again why these questions are really important. Not only do they set you up well with the employer by showing that you know what you're talking about, but also is giving you some key insight into whether or not you want to work there. Now, the fourth and final C is about close, and that's how to properly close out this conversation. So the question that you want to ask, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but I tell you, it really works, is if there were some skills or experience you wish I had that would make me a better fit for this job, what would they be? This is your polite way of asking if they feel you have any shortcomings or if there is something deficient about what you've presented to them today during the interview. This is a chance for them to call out and explain any certain skills or experience or things that might make them hesitate in hiring you. And so asking this question shows that you understand you're not a perfect candidate, but that you do want to know what you could have done better. By the same token, if they do share something with you, you now have an opportunity to say, oh, but I didn't share this experience, or maybe I didn't tell you about this skill set that I have. It's a chance for you to overcome that objection, maybe realizing that you didn't give them everything they needed to hear today. So that's a really important question to ask. Now, that last question is, what are the next steps in the process? And that's because you want to understand where you stand and what has to happen next for you to get hired. You don't ever want to leave a job wondering when you'll get a phone call, when they'll follow up, when they'll make their decision. So asking this question is going to help you get that information. And they're likely going to tell you some things like, well, we have a few more people to interview. You'll hear by this date. You'd need to come back in for another interview. But at least you'll have that information. You won't be staring at the phone or staring at your email and wondering whether or not you got the job. The other great thing about that is that if they give you a date or a deadline and it comes and goes, you now have a valid reason to follow up with them and say, you know, when we spoke in the interview, you mentioned this would be the next step. That date's come and gone. Is there anything else I can do to further my candidacy? So this is a really important question for you to ask for your own peace of mind. At the same time, it's going to give you a sense of how structured this company is and really how well thought out their own hiring process is, so that you can get a clear sense of whether or not they're the kind of company you want to work for. There you have it, the 4 C's: connect, culture, challenges, and close. And with 2 questions apiece, that creates 8 super smart questions you.
So I absolutely love that. I think everything about that is absolutely awesome, because I think it's appropriate, right? These are definitely questions and kind of ways of thinking about those questions that are going to be very relevant and appreciated by the people that are interviewing you. And if you are in a panel interview, or I shouldn't say panel interview, but you're in a multiple interviews over the course of the day, I think it's relevant to ask these questions of everybody that you talk to, right? Different perspectives will come out, and you'll also understand, like, what is real, what isn't real, right, in regards to these opportunities, as well as the company. Because I shouldn't say everybody, you'll figure out how aligned the company is, right? If some people feel different around the opportunity, around what's successful, or what is success, or what isn't success for opportunity. So definitely some real sound advice in there.
Hey, James, I have a
Yep.
quick question about one of the topics you present, and I totally understand. I guess the concept of, she mentioned you should ask like a positive question of like, what do you, what do you really like about your job, or like what do you think your company is best. However, when making like a fully sound decision, it is good to kind of know the negatives. How is there a good way to kind of ask about like, I'm thinking like, what can be improved with your company? But like, again, I understand why you want to keep it positive. You want to put someone in an awkward spot, but can you ask, is there a way to ask like, hey, what's not great about your company, or what can be improved, like in a good way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a couple different ways to answer it. Number one, when you're talking about the position itself, besides like what I think it is good. So what is going to make somebody successful in this role? I think it's fair to say, why is this role open to begin with? Was somebody not successful? What is going to make somebody not be successful in this role? I think it's perfectly acceptable to put that reverse question out there, right? I also think, there was the question of, and it kind of preceded that others, like, what are the biggest challenges the organization is going to have, right? Like, what are the biggest challenges this company has as it looks to scale or grow or maintain or whatever the hell it is over the next 12 months? That is a question, not necessarily of one of weakness, but it's like, I want to understand this company. Like, what are actually the challenges? I also think as somebody that works within the hiring chain, it's perfectly acceptable to understand, to ask the question, like, why is this role open? Is this a backfill? Right? Like, are we hiring because somebody left? Is this a net new position? Are we growing? What happened to the person that was here beforehand? Like, was it a mishire? I think those questions are okay, right? To understand full context of why this role actually exists and why we're looking to hire for it, right? So that's a great question. I don't think everything needs to be positive, like as far as framing it up in a sunny, cheery way. I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask a question that is direct, that isn't all rainbows and butterflies, like that you want to know, right? What exactly is going on within the company? Did that kind of answer the question, or did I skirt it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I understand the concept that she was providing, but do you think a question like, what can be improved with your company based on your opinion, is that going to be putting the interviewer like in an uncomfortable situation, or do you think that's a fair enough question to ask where they can give you maybe an honest answer without, jeopardizing their own job there?
Right. So I think that depends upon an individual style, but I have no problem asking that question, right? And I think it depends. It depends, right, on an individual, as well as you got to, when you're asking questions, this is typically at the end, right? So you have a feel for your interviewer. But like I have asked, like, I understand it's probably not all rainbows and butterflies here. Like, what are the biggest pain points? Like, why are there certain teams, are there certain deficiencies, and what are we doing to address them, right? Like, and how does this role play into it? I think that's a very fair question. I think it's a very fair question to ask that. Again, you want to read the room a little bit. It can be off-putting to certain people, but at the same point, to ask like, hey, not just what are the biggest challenges, but what are the areas where you see like real need for improvement within the organization? Are there, or are things looking pretty good? And you could frame it up with that last piece as a qualifier, as an out if they don't feel comfortable. My guess, anybody that is on an interview team is going to have something negative about a company to say. I love my company. I've been here for 5 years. That's a pretty solid go. We've got issues, right? Like every company does. And I think you'll want to get an answer out of that question. And you'll probably get it, right? I think it's a fair thing to ask. And if you're not going to get it, I'm not going to say that's a red flag, but it could be a yellow flag. Maybe the organization really isn't open to either feedback, or they kind of refuse to recognize shortcomings, or aren't transparent, right, to folks. The last thing just to draw it back to me personally, I've gone through a reduction recently, right? Like within the past year. Like I want people to know that before they ever engage into a real job search with us. Like it is only fair. Like I can't pretend that it's been great over the past year and a half. It is not, right? Like we lost some people. It's tough. Did we make it through? Absolutely. Are we in a stronger position? Yes, right. But last year and a half was really hard, right? And the people that stuck around, I really feel there's a reason why they stuck around, despite seeing people, unfortunately leave, not voluntarily. But it was a tough time. So I think being able to speak to that is a testament to the organization, the culture that we have. I'm not going to paint over that. I'm not going to gloss over that. If a company isn't ready to address or able to address the shortcomings that they do have, do they really even know what they are? Right. I don't know. Again, maybe that was a little long-winded and a little off topic.
One quick question. Sorry, I know other students might have questions.
No problem.
But just quick. I was wondering about this. I want to get your insight in terms of the follow-up. I've definitely heard like it's good to follow up with your interviewers after the fact, maybe like a week or two after, just to keep your name in their mind. Has it ever made a difference for you from the hiring side, like where someone followed up and you're like, all right, well, yeah, no, actually, I want to give this person a chance, or doesn't it really not make or break anyone? Like, has it ever swayed you, or is it just something polite to do, but not really, not going to make a difference?
Yes, I would say yes to both of those. Number one, the second part. B, I do think it's polite. I think it is the right thing to do, and I also think it's right for the organization to follow up. Right, like if you as an interviewer have given the time and the effort to interview for our company, that is not a small commitment, both before the interview as well as on site or over the internet or whatever the fuck it is. Excuse me. You deserve, right, some follow up. But I also think. I think it does set you aside, or set you apart. If it is a blanket, thank you for the time, it was nice meeting everybody, that doesn't show the interest. It doesn't show the true investment as somebody that says, it was a really great call or a great interview. I really enjoyed talking to Tim. Tim showed great passion for this. My experience aligns to that. I'm really excited about the opportunity for me to bring my skills to this specific endeavor. That has set people apart in the past, right? Now, I don't think every single follow-up to an interview needs to be quite that detailed, but yes, I do think a personalized thank you for your time. Here's one or two things or snippets or a single snippet that I remember from our conversation and why I think that's important or resonates with me and why it excites me. That has, like the person that I hired into my last account management position, it was in fact their follow-up email that said they're the stronger candidate, right? It was very much aligned to their skills, right, as well as to the role, but it definitely set them apart. So follow up, always follow up. Doesn't have to be crazy, but I definitely feel an email follow up to say thank you and hey, here's what resonated. I think it is very worthwhile. So, does anybody else have any other questions before we move on? Because I can talk about this all night long. All right. So, some additional questions to ask, either pre-interview, during interview. Why is the position open? What was the turnover been like in the past year? Who will the role report into? You should know all those things before you make it on site, right? To truly understand where this role aligns within the organization. These other things we kind of talked a little bit about as well, right? What's the projected growth? The other thing that I would add on top of the how is feedback delivered, like what is the management style, right? Like what kind of communication is there amongst manager and report? Like what do one-on-one meetings look like? Are they status reports? Is it more career planning? What does a career trajectory or career ladder look like? I think those are really valid questions. And again, it shows that you're looking to scale yourself and you'd rather scale yourself there with an organization that's going to show that you're supported. These are some general questions or general prep for interviews as well. What is the dress code for the interview? Who will I be meeting with and in what order? Make sure you get this information, or certainly do what you can. Dress code's usually pretty easy, right? The rule of thumb is you typically want to try to dress one rule or one step nicer than the people you'd be interviewing with. And people are always interested in sharing expectations, right? Like when people ask me when they come in on site, like, what are the expectations? I'm like, suits way too much, t-shirt and a jeans probably too little. Anywhere in between, cool, right? And that's fine, right? Like, but it's good to know exactly what the expectations are. Don't be afraid to ask what it should be. Definitely know who you're meeting with. You want to know who you're going to be talking with, and know not just their backgrounds through the company, but hey, a quick Google search to see if you know who they are. Yeah, any information you could share. LinkedIn is often very helpful here. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but understanding the environment and the people that you're talking with and working off the cues that they might be giving in conversation, either to themselves or to each other, if it's a pair interview, or to you directly. Josh will talk a little bit about this tomorrow too, but in technical interviews as well, when there's some sort of pair programming, oftentimes the interviewer that you're working with, the questions that they ask are less questions about why you're doing something and more, have you thought about it this way? Like, maybe they're trying to push you in that direction. So working off the cues that someone puts out there, and incorporating that into any sort of answer or work that you're doing. Employers are not allowed to ask about anything that's listed here: marital status, pregnancy, citizenship, and the like. It's actually illegal to do so. Hopefully they will not do it. And if they can, just say, I don't feel comfortable, or answering that question is actually needed. If they push back on that, which I suppose they can, that just kind of goes to me, that kind of shows the employer, and it's probably not an employer that I'm going to look at, because they're blatantly disregarding kind of compliance rules and the law. So might not be the best employer, but they are legally not allowed to ask for those things. What to do if an or an interviewer is being rude? Thankfully, this doesn't happen too often. Sometimes it does. Thankfully, again, rarely. But if it does happen, try your best, right, to either steer the conversation or discussion in a positive way. But if it can't happen, I think it's fair, right, to say, is there a better time that we can maybe meet, right? Or is there I don't feel comfortable with this line of questioning. You can say those things. And if it's an aggressive response, I think, again, it goes back to it might not be the best place, right? And you can always follow up with your interviewer, your recruiter, and just say, it wasn't a pleasant experience. Maybe that person was having, and I'm not looking to victim blame here, right? Maybe that person was having a difficult day. Maybe there is an excuse for it, but at the same point in time, in my mind, there really is an excuse for an interviewer to be rude. Certainly not to somebody that they're looking to vet as a potential colleague or employee. But I do feel if it gets to the point where you are uncomfortable, you can excuse yourself from the conversation. Say, thank you very much for the time. I don't feel really good about this, and maybe we can get there. Again, hasn't happened frequently, or just a handful of times in my 15 years of hiring. But if it does, excuse yourself. It's not the place you want to be. I'm going to get back to some of the questions you had earlier. I do feel thank you emails are necessary, or I shouldn't say necessary, definitely appreciated, and they can help you stand out. And I think it is worth the while to be specific in regards to how you position your time, or your message in regards to the time that you spent with that person. Follow up with a recruiter, just like JT said, and just make sure you have an understanding of the timeline to the decision and hold them to that. right? There's no reason not to. And if you do, I just had an offer that I put out last week. The candidate that I put out the offer to, he did have another offer that kind of pushed me to move a little faster. I never would have moved as fast if I didn't know. So it's nice to know anything and everything in regards to your current situation and everything that you have in play, to not necessarily play things against each other, but just make sure everybody's transparent, right? That is and should be the goal from all parties. If you do, and hopefully you do, I shouldn't say that, excuse me. If you do get rejected for a role, which hopefully will not happen, but it can, and it will, like we all do get rejected for roles. Don't use it as an opportunity to become argumentative, but use it as an opportunity to learn. You can express some disappointment. There's no reason not to, right? And certainly if it's an opportunity that you were very excited about, but try to understand the why and the areas for you to improve. The one thing that I'll add on top of that is I have hired somebody that we initially did turn down, and the reason why was shared with them during the interview process, or I shouldn't say the interview process, but post-interview. They went and did work and sent work several months later, 3 to 4 months later, on how they were addressing that gap, and sent a new application across. We interviewed them a few weeks later and we hired them, right? So they used the declined interview, or the declined offer, I should say, as an opportunity to learn, went and learned, and then they got the job offer, right? So using it as a place to learn is probably a better way than becoming argumentative. All right, questions? That was a lot. I talked a lot. Hopefully I went a little long, so hopefully I didn't bore anybody too much. But any questions? And just real quickly, I apologize for some spotty video at near the beginning of the session. That was not the intent. So hopefully it wasn't too difficult for you to hang on and gain something from. But now that the presentation portion is over, Q&A. Anybody got something?
I have a really random question. Well,
Okay.
maybe not super random. I guess it applies to all of us, but like, if you were to list a group project on your resume, how would you specifically tailor that to yourself? Or would you just kind of give the overview and let it be a little vague, let them ask?
I would not be vague, right? I think you should be as direct as possible in regards to your individual contributions. So there's two ways. There's the we that should be addressed in the interview or in the resume, right? It's like, we addressed this problem, or we found this problem, or we approached it this way. This is my piece, right? This is what I did. This is how I contributed. This is our net results. This is how my contribution aided these results, right? I think there's a way, and this is not just with a group project that might be academic in nature, but it's anything. Like, chances are, right, you are always in a group, right? Like, it's always a team. There's always, I shouldn't say always, there's almost always a we. But what anybody is going to be looking to uncover is how you help the we, right? Like, in an interview, it's like, well, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. It's like, well, what did you do? Like, how did you help the we? Like, what did you do to push that needle? Versus, I was just a follower and I did what I was told, right? Like, nobody wants to hear that. So I feel being able to speak to the group accomplishments, but how you aided those group accomplishments directly is absolutely necessary. Long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, makes sense. Thank you.
How do you deal with jobs that you've done that you don't like?
That's a great question. How do you deal with jobs that you don't like? Can you offer a little more context on that? So are we talking about like somebody going through a resume, or are we talking about like
Right. So I'm in the interview. I've got my resume. I was in the Air Force for 20 years. The first half, I loved my job. The second half, I didn't.
Yep.
In that, I transitioned from being a computer programmer for the Air Force to being an Intel analyst. And so that the Intel analyst, while the training part of it was fun.
Yep.
Once you got out of training, there was only just like, it was such the tip of the iceberg. And they tried to make it fun for you in training, which obviously is a good thing. But then the rest of it was like literally boring as shit.
Yep.
Like, how do you deal with, like, I was mind numbed, bored out of my skull.
Sure.
And, obviously I did some positive things. I still got promoted, blah, 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 blah.
Yay.
How do I, exactly, how do I,
Yeah.
I just,
Sure.
how do I deal with all that?
Sure. So there's a couple of ways you can approach this, right? Number one, after 10 years in a single, not necessarily single function, you experienced some growth in it, but one single discipline, right? It was like you were given an opportunity. Number one, that's always the way. You were approached with an opportunity, right, to learn something new and add value in a different way. Like they came to ask you for that. It's my guess, right? Like if not, you could tell that story, right? Like they said, you've been a great performer. We want to see what you can do here, right? And this is not just for this specific instance, but any instance. Like if you have a duration of multiple years in a single entity, you could say, I've taken on different roles. Well, typically that's going to be because you weren't pushed into those roles, you were pulled into them, right? Like your opportunity, your contributions were good. I want to pull those into here because we need help here, right? So there's that. So you saw this as well as an opportunity to continue to grow and scale your skills, right? Learn something new, have greater opportunity for contributions. You were very excited about it. You're a company person, right? To some extent, right? Like you made a significant investment. They were making an investment in you, and you were very, very excited about it. There was a lot of opportunity for you. Pardon me. If you heard my daughter get a little upset there, but the spin here, and it is kind of spin. I was very happy to take on that challenge. Ultimately, I didn't feel it aligned with my interests as much as I thought it would, right? I was able to learn, I was able to grow, I stuck with it, and I continued to try to take on new opportunities within this realm. But it didn't feel like it was fulfilling me, right, in the way that I wanted it to, right? And ultimately it was time to move on. Now that's fair. You took on a lot, you continued to grow, you didn't pack your bags and head out the door, right? You did it. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. And that's okay. Not every career move is the right move, right? It's not the right move. So I think it's assuming my story, I just put words in your mouth is appropriate, right? Then I think that is a fair thing for a hiring manager to hear.
Okay. That's at least 95% accurate. The entirety of that.
but the big thing is like anytime that you get either promoted or take on new opportunities within a single organization, 20 years in the Air Force, that's a big go, right? You don't want to say, well, I hit 20 years, I got the pension or whatever. You don't want to do that. Like I hung in as long as I could, and then I cashed out as soon as I could, right? That's not what you want to hear, right? But you gave it a solid go. You gained and learned a lot of skills, and ultimately you just didn't feel like the direction that you had been on was the right direction for you to be on anymore, right? You wanted to go back, right? And that's why you joined this cohort, right? This platoon, the co-platoon, to reinvigorate your technical skills, right? The actual programming component, because that's what you liked. Right?
Absolutely.
Like as an analyst, yeah, you're digging into data, you're trying to find insights, you're trying to provide, what that was cool. There was lots of cool stuff in there, but it didn't get me. I didn't wake up thinking I was going to love my day like I did when I was programming. That's why I came back to it, right? Like again, like I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's a story to tell.
Cool. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? The other thing that we haven't talked about, and I don't have time tonight because I actually do have to start getting prepared for bedtime, and I might jump in on the end of tomorrow's call after Josh talks. We haven't talked about like offer negotiation or anything like that, and like what to do when you do get offers and how to deal with that. And I think there is, if I remember correctly, there's actually like there's a session on that now, right? Doesn't somebody lead that? Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have a Beyond Tech segment for covering that material.
Yeah, awesome. I love that shit. Like it's like it is my favorite. So if there's I am on Slack. If there are ever any questions about that, if you got an offer presented to you, if you want to talk about how to approach an offer or how to approach those types of conversations with any organization like that, I love it. Like that's like one of my favorite things. So I want to make myself available as a resource there, even if it's a secondary resource, to handle those types of conversations. Please do not hesitate to reach out. But I don't have anything else for tonight. If there are no other questions, I'll let you get on because tomorrow is going to be awesome. I really think I think you'll very much enjoy the conversation with Josh. So anything else, or should we call it a night? We call it a night.
Yep. Sounds like we'll get there. James, thanks a lot. It was a great presentation, and yeah, definitely looking forward to tomorrow, which is going to be technical interview skills. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Gotcha. Yep. All right. Yeah. Hopefully everyone can join tomorrow again. James, thanks again. We'll see you shortly, soon enough.
You got it. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.